Mahatma Gandhi is fondly remembered as the father of the nation by millions of Indians. It was he who transformed the reformist agitation of middle-class leaders into a revolutionary upsurge that led to the disintegration of the mightiest empire on earth and culminated in the liberation of India after centuries of servitude. He told fellow countrymen, "Let us not think of making a political picnic of speeches and other demonstrations, but willingly accept the drudgery and trouble of quiet, silent work." The quiet, silent work of Gandhi had a deep impact on the lives of the people, and the changes brought about were indeed dramatic. "Divine Providence has given us," said poet Tagore, "a burning thunderbolt of truth." Jawaharlal Nehru found him the man with the divine fire. Hundreds of thousands of common men and women, touched by the spark of this divine fire, achieved superhuman courage. Ordinary Indians shed their fear of the white ruler when their lives were lit by a patriotic glow. It was this frail man, a small bundle of bones, who filled millions with indomitable courage, rid them of national shame and humiliation, and inspired them to give up the security of their hearts and to jump unhesitatingly into the battle against the oppressor. Women, who had hitherto lived under the veil, confined to the four walls of their homes, stepped out boldly to man the barricades. Inspired by him, Hindus and Muslims could after decades overcome mutual suspicions and once again began to fraternize. It was Gandhi who brought the famished and the socially outcast to the forefront and encouraged the poor peasant to hold his head high. How did he work this miracle?
We can see Gandhi, first of all, in the context of his age. That was the age of Western dominance. The West was ruling the East. And perhaps more than any other human being, he equalized the East with the West. He was the man of his age, or as we would say in Hindi, he was the Yug Purush. But the question also arises whether he has something to say for our age, for the ages to come. It seems to me he does. In our age and for all time to come, human beings will want to struggle for some great end in view, for justice. Gandhi said, yes, you have to struggle. Life is struggle, but struggle must be non-violent. If it is a violent struggle, you will never achieve your goal. All you will achieve is more violence. So he laid this tremendous stress on non-violence and demonstrated it with his life. He demonstrated that non-violence could succeed. And in many parts of the world, since his time, other individuals have demonstrated, yes, in certain cases, non-violence can succeed. But apart from the evidence that non-violence can succeed, the world has seen tremendous evidence, conclusive evidence, that violence simply creates more of itself. The world is now clear on that point.
Fight, he realized, is necessary in this world. Combat we must against evil and injustice that threaten us. If we tolerate untruth, we will cease to exist. But the fight he exhorted his people to participate in was a unique fight. What he waged was moral warfare. The resistance he propagated was akin to Dharma Yudh, a concept not unknown to ancient Indians. In his fight against imperial British rule, he opened for India and the world a new chapter of human history. Gandhi had the magic touch that could transform mere mortals into heroes. It was his unflinching faith in God that sustained his courage in the darkest moments. Let him know that all pain and death are mere shadows of the moment, and truth shall ultimately emerge like the sunrise from the mist. What is remarkable is that he could convert others to this faith. Swaraj for him was not an abstraction, but something that made sense to the starving millions, and Swadeshi, not a fetish, but a strategy that promised to immediately empower the enfeebled and the exploited. Autonomy and self-reliance went hand in hand in his scheme of things and provided the requisite momentum to the Indian freedom struggle for decades. These concepts remain relevant in this day and age when the world is fast evolving into an interdependent market. While we open our doors and windows, we cannot let ourselves be swept off our feet. Nor can we let domination and dependence sneak in through some unguarded inlet.
Firstly, the world itself is becoming interdependent because of technology. It's precisely the forecast that a person like Gandhiji had given about the world. And he was trying to awaken us at that time that what we do here has consequences everywhere. So when you see ecological movements transcending national frontiers, or causes like women's empowerment transcending international frontiers, they are exactly Gandhian causes. Often their words are not Gandhian, their deeds are not Gandhian, but the thought is very compatible with what Gandhiji was saying. Second point, I think, is that yes, in the first flush, the multinationals and all that are coming with a sort of consumerism, which Gandhiji would have abhorred. But we will be very quickly satiated by it. I have little doubt. And a country like India, placed as we are, already 1 billion people, by the middle of the century, another 500 million would have been added probably. We will not be able to afford this level of consumer satiation.
There is something live and vibrant about him that keeps his memory fragrant despite the passage of years. Despite intense religiosity and strong spiritual streak, it was man, not God, that was placed at the center of Gandhi's universe. For him, the supreme being and the wretched of the earth were one and the same, Daridra Narayan. The hungry millions he knew asked for only one poem, invigorating food. His self-assigned mission in life was to empower the weak and to enable the downtrodden to help themselves. A drowning man, Gandhi said, cannot save others. Today, when the planet ravaged by the greed of mankind, caught in a frenzy of overconsumption, is perched on the edge of a precipice, the magnificent message of Gandhi continues to pull us back powerfully from the brink.
His philosophy of simple living, of not having consumerism, of having simple technologies, really helped the environment movement. This is what the environment movement is all about, to look at technologies which don't destroy the earth, to look at consumerism in a limited fashion which doesn't destroy the earth. And if your philosophy is to consume less, to have as little as possible, and as Gandhiji's very famous phrase, the world has enough for everyone's need but not for everyone's greed, is really the fundamental aspect of the environment movement today, that we must reduce consumerism.
Violence, he believed, degraded man and jeopardized everything. Violence against other men and against nature. This was what covered truth with a veil of ignorance that separated us from God, our true, noble self. Religion was the sheet anchor that helped him retain his moorings despite the turbulence that at times seemed overwhelming. Gandhi's involvement with religion was not born of any urge for personal salvation. Neither was it confined to abstractions. Ethics and moral values in public life were integral to Gandhi's approach. These are what may be termed perennial concerns of humanity.
I came across a sentence in his autobiography, his preface to the autobiography, which I have never forgotten, that his dearest wish was to see God face to face. And this in the autobiography of a political leader who was at that time conducting the most important mass struggle for political liberation. But how important religion was to him came home to me in a diary entry by Mahadev Desai. He said that one day he got up at night, Mahadev, and found Gandhi sitting in the bed, shivering, sweating, shaking. And he asked him, Bapu, what is wrong? Are you having a heart attack? Should I send for a doctor? He said, no, Mahadev. Do you know what happened yesterday? I forgot to pray before sleeping. I did not forget to eat. I did not forget other things, but I forgot to pray. And now, I think it was such a deep and such a great influence on him that we cannot understand his life or his work or his teachings without understanding what religion meant to him.
His religion had no place for dogma or superstition. He knew that tolerance and humanism are the distilled essence of all religious teachings. Gandhi strove to unveil this underlying unity. Western scholars have only recently started talking of civilizational fault lines that threaten to fracture international relations in the coming century. In most cases, these overlap and accentuate religious divisions. The world has yet to rid itself of communal prejudice, fanaticism, and destructive passions. As long as these emotions continue to poison our lives, Gandhi will remain indispensable.
Gandhiji was a good Hindu and realized the correctness and the freedom of people to be good Muslims and good Parsis and good Christians. That was the meaning of secularism that he not only propagated but believed in it sincerely himself. Now, his problem was, and I think this is a major piece of thinking which Gandhiji is responsible for and propagating and inculcating in the minds of his immediate followers, Panditji and Sardar Patel and Maulana Azad, or whoever these people were, inculcated, and the whole group absorbed these ideas. What were they? What is the primary loyalty of an Indian, of a citizen, and what are the other legitimate loyalties which people can practice? But what are the illegitimate loyalties which are harmful to the nation and should be given up? The illegitimate loyalty that he discovered, among some others also, was the racial loyalty, loyalty to a particular race. And one form of race is caste. He was totally opposed to that. He saw much demerit in that than merit. That loyalty was destructive and cannot be practiced. So the temples had to be open to everybody, irrespective of caste, and if he had his will, intermarriages or whatever. But then was loyalty to a language legitimate or not? He said it is a legitimate loyalty. You can practice your own language, nothing against. Is the loyalty to a particular region legitimate or not? Is it all right to be a Maharashtrian and propagate it? He said yes. A regional loyalty is a legitimate loyalty. Religious loyalty, what is the position? Can one be loyal to one's religion? He said yes. To be a Muslim, to be a Christian, to be a Parsi or whatever, or a Hindu, is a very legitimate loyalty. So he legitimized all these loyalties. And that is one part of his secularism. I am a Hindu, but the other man has the right to be a Muslim, and I have nothing against him.
He represented the wonderful continuity of India's cultural tradition that has known no break and can never be laid low by any disaster. He personified Buddhist and Jain influences, and his concept of ahimsa incorporated the legacy of Ashoka and freely drew from the sources of other religious traditions. He appealed to our reason and emotion at the same time, making it impossible not to heed his call. Gandhi was a symbol of India, steeped in her ancient culture, drawing strength from roots deep down in the soil, with a mind roaming across millennia that have gone to make India what she is. Yet he lived every moment of his life in the present, responsive to the gathering storms, eddies, and flow of turbulent waters, ever ready to guide his fellow countrymen from howling winds or rising tides. He was, as Nehru said, the greatest symbol of India's past as well as of India's future. Gandhi's was a mind that anticipated future in an uncanny manner. His aim was to modify modern civilization, not to uproot it. He was, for instance, scathing in his criticism of the railways, but this did not stop him from using them. He believed in the open air and good earth, and in turning enemies into friends. But he was not hostile to the 19th and 20th centuries.
There are very many instances of Mahatma Ji's own concept of science for the people. I think Gandhiji's concept was there should be a social contract between scientists and society. When he visited the National Dairy Research Institute in Bangalore in the late 20s, 1920s, in the visitor's book he wrote his own name, M.K. Gandhi. There was a column called Occupation. He put farmer Porbanda. In other words, he felt agriculture. He wanted to identify himself as a farmer, and he had many times felt our agriculture should have a synthesis of brain and brawn. When he addressed a group of agricultural and rural development workers, he said, you go to the people, they are hardworking, they will do the work, but they require your knowledge, your intellect. We must marry intellect and labor. This dichotomy should end in agriculture. This was his saying, and also in everyone, he was probably one of the earliest who thought of agricultural development as a methodology of providing employment to the people, livelihood to the people.
The major source of discord in the world today is persistence of social disparities, violation of human rights, and indifference to the aspirations of minorities create conflicts that erupt often violently. Gandhi's commitment to social justice and equality was uncompromising. Gandhi always championed the cause of the downtrodden and the oppressed. The unique weapon he forged was to empower the weak. In unequal combat, the underprivileged could not expect to match the exploiter. Non-violence remained the principal concern of Gandhi throughout his life. Satyagraha, the strategy of non-violently confronting and neutralizing brute force, the method Gandhi perfected, has proved its efficacy time and again, not only in India, but in Africa, Asia, and America.
There are certain assumptions in non-violent battles, techniques, Gandhi's battles. One is that the soul is imperishable, the body may perish. Then it is possible for a man to fight for causes which transcend his personal interests, a great cause, and from which he has nothing to gain personally, or very little to gain. And thirdly, that in every human being, however wicked he may seem to us, there is some element of goodness. There is some divine spark which can be ignited. I think these are the basic assumptions in waging a non-violent battle.
Mahatma was in a long line of ancient sages and seers. Gandhi had anticipated much before anyone else the crisis that was overtaking the modern civilization. Gandhi reminded us time and again, it is good to swim the waters of tradition, but to sink in them is suicide.
I think that he would be one of the very, very few persons from the 20th century who would last the entire 21st century, because of the dilemmas into which industrial and this technological civilization itself is going. And in many respects, I feel that the technology that is now coming is actually a very Gandhian technology. Computers are very Gandhian. Internet is very Gandhian because it's low cost energy saving, I don't have to travel, I can access information, libraries anywhere. Bad people can communicate with each other, but good people can also communicate at very little cost. All these are quite Gandhian. And you see, because of the Gandhiji's dress, because of his emphasis on the charkha, we should not really look upon him as a throwback. It's a very modern mind, a mind looking far ahead. So he's actually saying, not this technology. But he's not saying no technology at all. And I think that's exactly the kind of realization to which technological thinkers have now come to.
He has left behind persuasive answers to the difficult yet everyday questions of our relationship with one another. Gandhi enriches us by making each one of us aware of our own potential and hidden reservoirs of strength.
I don't think Gandhi was against technology which would help the poor. So, to take Dr. Kurian's example, I mean, it isn't that he hasn't used modern technology, but the technologies that he has used have all been in favor of the poor farmer in terms of, and he has helped millions of poor people all over India. So I think one can misread Gandhiji in this respect that you should only have charkha and khadi, which is of course important, I think. But at that stage it was important because we were fighting the British. Even now, I think, as long as we look at technologies which would help the poor, there is no harm in picking up the most modern of technology. And I think the information technology, which is the latest, in fact, can help much more in getting information to people who really need it to improve things. So in some ways, I think we have not misunderstood Gandhi, but if we are too strictly, narrowly Gandhian, then we can not be fair to Gandhi, in fact, to Gandhi's teachings.
Gandhi taught us to shed fear and hatred, told us of unity and equality, and brotherhood, the dignity of labor, and raising those who have been for generations suppressed.
Large-scale industry is also not irrelevant either in Gandhiji's thinking, because his concept of trusteeship was there. He wanted and expected the large industry also to continue and develop further, but he wanted to put on them certain social responsibilities, what we would now call welfare. Welfare should come not only from the state. Why only from the state? But also from the top brass of the industrial sector. And he wanted to put on them a responsibility not only to do well in their industry, expand, grow, develop, but at the same time perform some duties for the society by way of school, provision of schooling, provision of literacy, provision of health measures for their own staff and employees, and also for the community as well. So nothing against large scale industry, but his focus was on the small man, and millions of small people could only practice small industry. That's why he focused on that. Today, the meaning of Gandhianism in economics, in my opinion, would be that whatever is being done in the context of globalization with a view to exporting, importing, foreign trade, technology imports, and technology exports, once we become tough ourselves in this matter, all this should be for the benefit of the nation and not be anti-national. That is the new interpretation.
Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi returned to India when the country was engulfed in turmoil. Shame and humiliation had gripped the land. He realized the futility of violence and told his compatriots, "We cannot fight the exploiter with their weapons, but the day is coming when the whole world will fight on our side." History has proved Gandhi right.
He was not against methods of mass production, but his choice of production by masses as the methodology of our rural advancement was largely because he felt that mass production methodologies cannot create jobs for the millions of the poor people in this country. And I think the wisdom of this statement is clear. Today I think it is clear that unless in rural areas we are able to withdraw a large number of people from routine operations of farming and provide opportunities for value-added rural non-farm employment, khadi itself as a symbol of not only self-reliance but also value addition to the primary product. Why part with the cotton and get textiles from somewhere else? Why can't we spin it even if we don't have modern spinning mills? Let us make it into cloth. I think the khadi is a very good example of value addition to primary produce and also getting money out of labor, out of idle labor, many times at home in your own free time, flexi time. Therefore, I think looking back, Gandhiji's ecological ideas, Gandhiji's ideas on employment generation, Gandhiji's ideas of science for the masses and technology for the masses have today, at the end of this century and the end of this millennium, assumed not only relevance to our own country, but I think it is a global relevance because everyone today is striving for a new paradigm of development rooted in the principles of ecology, of equity, and employment generation, or a job-led economic growth, not a jobless growth, which is a joyless growth.
He lived in the hearts of the millions and will continue to live for immemorial ages. Will his achievement endure?
He was a fearless defender of individual human rights of every kind. But he also felt that individuals had to recognize and recognize and acknowledge the human right of other individuals. And if there was a conflict of opinion, say in religious matters, between some who held one particular view very strongly and others who held a different view equally strongly, Gandhi advocated reconciliation, tolerance, dialogue. And it seems to me that here again his message will be relevant for the future. Finally, Gandhi had something to say about the ends of human beings, the goal for men and women in our time as well as in the future. Today is the age not only of globalization, but of more and more. We want more and more comfort. We want more of this and more of that, more pleasure, more enjoyment. Gandhi said, the less I have, the more I am. The less I have, the more I become. This runs counter to the trend of our times, but perhaps this perspective is relevant for the future.
Because we continue to live in a world torn with hatred and violence, fear and passion, with the shadow of war clouding our lives. His voice may not be heard easily by many in the tumult, but it will ultimately be heeded. It has to, if the world is to survive. This message is not confined to any country or time. His is truly the voice for the millennium.